able to tell their sister who lives 3 blocks away or their aunt who lives 4 blocks away, and we want the information to disseminate amongst the families in the community. So this is primarily who this is for. So we're not looking for, you know, I know you all write at college level, but 5th, 6th grade reading capacity is really what we're looking for. Very basic, very simple.
That's important.
Very
I had
important.
forgotten that part, and you did tell me that. See, in an academic, that just goes through the sieve.
Yeah, everything we write, all of our flyers are not above a 5th grade level. No.
Where you want to walk us in the
That
street?
was on the corner of Cicero and Cermak. And they went from Cicero and Cermak all the way south to 31st and Cicero. And they employed, when they built that company, they built a lot of these homes in the areas to house the employees who worked there. And then as they started to bring in more and more Mexican folks to work railroad, to work mechanics, to work different things, they started to come in through Pilsen and come into the little village community when they would save enough money to be able to bring their families into the neighborhood. So you will find, especially in this part of the neighborhood, that there are a lot of elder Bohemian and Polish people who still live in the neighborhood. And they just, you know, they speak Spanish too, some of them. And, you know, they've seen the neighborhood change. But you also have a lot of older businesses who have been around a long time. So like this business, they obviously make signs, as you can see. And so they have been here forever. And it's pretty cool because you walk around the neighborhood and you see these humongous signs. You know, and it's nice to know that it's a local business that supplies them. So this is one of the biggest environmental impacts that we have in our community. This is the Crawford Coal Power Plant. This is one of 2 coal power plants in the city of Chicago. That big mountain over there is the mountain of coal that they basically boil to create electricity. Some of the interesting things about this coal power plant is, number one, it's incredibly old. It's over 80 years old, or almost 80 years old. And they pretty much run in the same way they did 80 years ago. I mean, their technology has not changed much in the last 80 years. And they produce electricity to sell out of state. So we actually don't get any electricity in the city of Chicago or in the state of Illinois from this coal power plant. And that's a huge issue for us because they're so outdated and they pollute so much, but we get no benefit from it. It's not like we get power from them. And so we have been advocating for the last 8 years to shut them down. Now, these big power lines that you see running through the neighborhood, the reason that they're here is that for a long time, Crawford and Fisk, the one in Pilsen, in the summertime when it would get really, really hot and everybody would crank up their air conditioners, or in the wintertime when it would get really, really cold and people would crank up their heaters, the power in Chicago, there wasn't enough power in Chicago to carry that amount of load. And so they would chip in some electricity to help handle that load. Well, the state decided, you know what, we don't want to use them anymore. We're going to create these huge transmission lines to bring in electricity from the nuclear power plants instead. And so they actually literally bypass the coal power plants now. And so literally it is absolutely amazing. So they are actually now no longer of use at all in the state. And so we've been fighting for, like I said, 8 years to get them to shut down. We don't want them cleaned up. We just want them shut down. Nobody in our neighborhood works there. We get absolutely no benefit from having them here in the neighborhood. If anything, they just did some air monitoring at a school in Pilsen, and it showed that the amount of lead in the air is astronomical. And part of it has to do with these coal power plants. I'm not going to say that they are the only reason we have air pollution or that they are the only cause of air pollution in our community, but there's something called cumulative risk impact, and they are part of many industries that are in our neighborhood that if you combine them all together, create a really toxic cocktail of air pollution in our community. And so we want them to be shut down. And so we work with a lot of folks in the neighborhood to talk about a couple of things. The dust that comes off of that coal pile affects this entire part of the neighborhood. I mean, most of these folks will open their window in the summertime and they will get a layer of coal dust in their house and on their clothes. And so they're actually, a lot of these homeowners are suing the coal power plant for trespassing. Because when that coal dust goes into your property, technically speaking, they're trespassing onto your property. And so there's a civil lawsuit that just started against the coal power plant. The other thing is the smoke that comes out of the smokestacks is incredibly polluted. And so the federal government is currently suing them because they violated many standards over the course of many years. And so we're hoping that that will also impact them. Right, so because they're so old, they don't have to follow any new regulations. They can continue to burn as usual. Like if I were to build a coal power plant today, there would be very stringent guidelines on air pollution that I would have to follow. They don't have to follow it because they were built before any of those laws were enacted. And so that's a problem also because we suffer the brunt of their pollution for the sake of making money. And basically they're running these things into the ground. They could care less. They're trying to make money off them hand over fist. And they will prefer to shut them down than spend any money cleaning them up. Even we had a state law passed that would make them clean up the mercury. This plant is the last one on the list. It won't get cleaned up until 2014. And so, 14. Mm-hmm. And by then, who knows what will happen. If we get a Republican in office, there goes the Clean Air Act. You know, I mean, they are literally waiting. They're waiting to see what's going to happen. And waiting and sitting on money is all they're doing while our community suffers the brunt of their pollution. And so this is why we fight for more than just shut down a coal power plant. 420 is about all extraction. We don't want any of our electricity to come from coal. We don't want it to come from nuclear. We don't want it to come from any of these sources that are detrimental to our health and the environment. We actually know as a community that if we could get a local energy source, geothermal, if we could retrofit our homes with energy efficiency, we could create our own grid as a community and thrive off of that grid and not need large sources of electricity. So this is more than just shut down the coal power plant. This is really about talking to people about their lifestyle, the choices they make, and being conscious about how much electricity they use, you know, and do they need all the things that they have, you know, and the choices that they make on a day-to-day basis. And so it's about, again, elevating people's consciousness to more than just let's shut down this coal power plant. Well, no, it's more than that. And so when you talk to folks, that's what we're looking to find out. Is aside from what you learned about the coal power plant, what impact did it have on you? What else did you do with that? You know.
What is your opinion of clean coal?
There is no such thing as clean coal. I mean, you grab a piece of coal, you're gonna get dirty. There is no such thing as clean coal. Coal is coal is coal is coal. You still have to blow up a mountain. You still have to tear up the land in order to get it. There is no clean coal. That's an oxymoron. So what we're going to do, and I should probably mention too, for those of you who don't know, coal is one of the worst fossil fuels, because to get coal you have to blow up mountains and create these huge holes in the ground. So in West Virginia, Appalachia, Tennessee, you have entire communities that are completely being wiped out to get at the coal. And coal miners is one of the deadliest jobs in the United States. So then you have those communities getting screwed for getting coal, and then you have to transport the coal into a neighborhood like this where we're getting screwed because of the coal dust and the coal coming out of pollution. But then this actually creates a byproduct called coal ash, which they use to put in the highways, into streets. They actually mix it into cement. And coal ash, they create these coal ash ponds because it's just a waste. And these ponds are built and they just sit in the ground. And in Tennessee, there was a coal pond that sat up on the top of a mountain, and there was a school that sat right below it. And the school literally had about a minute and a half. If that pond were to ever break, they would have a minute and a half to evacuate the entire building before those kids would basically get killed. And so they've actually relocated that school, thankfully enough. But there was a spill in Tennessee about 5 years ago, and thousands of people lost their homes and their lives because of coal ash. And so it's just a deadly cycle of a fossil fuel. And so we let people know about all of that. This is not just about this coal power plant. It's about those people who are dealing with coal, us, and the people at the other end who are dealing with the coal ash.
So it's not just about NIMBY?
Nope, not in my backyard. It's not in anybody's backyard. Nope, that's exactly right. So we can go ahead. Actually, we'll go this way and we'll go up. Just to give you some history, the Blue Bag program actually started in Denver. The city of Denver was actually the ones who invented it, or ran it. And it didn't work for them, so then our illustrious mayor decided that it was going to work for him. So he brought it here, and it doesn't work here either. But basically what it is that you buy blue bags, you put your recyclables in it, and you throw it out with the rest of your garbage. The problem with that is that, number one, most poor people, much less poor people of color, don't even buy garbage bags. Most people use the grocery bags that you got with your groceries and put your garbage in that. And so if you expect people to then go out and buy blue bags, that's not going to happen. And so what would happen is these garbage sorting facilities started to pop up in the neighborhood. in all kinds of, well, primarily in low-income communities of color, ours being one of them. And they popped up overnight. They were able to get in because they barely met the 500 feet from residential home. There's a law here that if you're going to build something new within 500 feet of people's homes, you have to send postcards to them to let them know, and there has to be a public meeting about it. So in our neighborhood, nobody knew that this garbage sorting facility was moving in. But when Midway Airport expanded, we all knew about it because we all got postcards. Now, Midway Airport is probably about 3 miles away from us. And so it was very interesting how the whole politics of that worked out. But regardless, they moved in, and they're actually the building right over there that has all those little smokestacks on it. And so one summer, we can actually stop right here. One summer, what ended up happening is that all of a sudden it started to smell like garbage. Like literally, it smelled like garbage. From here, probably all the way up to our office, about 4 blocks north, it just smelled like garbage on a regular basis. And that was a problem, obviously. You know, it's the middle of summertime, you want to barbecue, you want to have a picnic outside, and you can't because it really reeks like garbage out here. And so people weren't really sure what the heck was going on. And then all of a sudden, by the fall, the rat population in this part of the neighborhood particularly basically tripled. And I'm not talking about your little field mice, I'm talking about your city rats with tail but this big. And one of the interesting things about rats is if a rat can squeeze its nose through it, it can squeeze its whole body through it, because their bones are flexible. And so if you have a garage with holes or a basement with holes on it, the rats are coming in. And so people started to freak out, obviously, because all of a sudden there's 3 times as many rats running around the neighborhood. And so the city came out, and what the city does is they put out these little blue pellets of poison that they hope that the rats will eat. Well, the problem that incurs is that domestic animals eat them. And so we had a number of animals, particularly pets, that passed away in the neighborhood. And so people were really pissed at that point. And so what they started to do was so the smell, the rats, the animals dying. But then what we started to realize was there was a buttload of garbage trucks that were coming through our neighborhood now, especially down Lawndale. And people didn't understand why all these garbage trucks were coming into our neighborhood. So what they did was they followed the garbage trucks. One day we had about 100 people just literally walk and follow the garbage trucks, and they ended up at that building. And they asked them, they're like, what do you guys do here? And they're like, well, we basically sort your garbage. Your garbage, along with 6 other zip codes. We sort all of your garbage. And so they asked for a meeting. They called us and they said, look, can you guys come to this meeting? We said, yeah, sure, not a problem, we'll come. We came to the meeting. There's about 200 community people who had organized themselves. And they were demanding questions. They were like, who allowed you to build here? Who said you guys could be here? You know, why do you have all this garbage here? And basically what they do is the garbage gets unloaded from the back of the garbage truck onto the floor. They have conveyor belts, and they push all the garbage onto the conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt goes around the entire building. And you have departments. You have the metal department, you have the yard waste department, you have the plastics department. And what you have is people literally ripping open the bags of garbage and taking out all the recyclables that correspond to your own department. And then what they do is they then put all the plastics that they collected and they auction them off to recyclers. They auction off the metals and they auction off everything else. And what they can't recycle goes to the landfill. And all that money that they make off of our garbage goes to whoever got the contract. So in this case, Waste Management had the contract. They got all the money from auctioning off our recyclables. We got no money back. Any of the 6 zip codes got any of the money back from our garbage being recycled. The blue bag program then is mute because they're still ripping open the blue bags anyway, just like they're ripping up your garbage. But they did this every day of the week, 3 shifts.